Please be aware if you are attending this meeting, our meetings are recorded for future viewing and we are privileged to gather on the traditional territory of the Kwakwaka'wakw. I'll call the meeting to order and ask if there are any additions or amendments to the agenda. Seeing none, then have a motion please to accept the agenda as presented. Seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. For February 8th, 2022, Committee of the Whole minutes. Are there any corrections? And if none, a motion to adopt, please. Seconded by Councillor Barron. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. February 17th, 2022. Any amendments to the agenda? If not, motion to adopt.
Can I just ask a question?
Yeah, certainly.
16/2022. It says, and the costs associated with the project.
Oh, I'm sorry. 16/20.
I don't remember that being part of the motion. Because how do we know the costs? Like, how is our staff going to prepare the costs associated with putting that road in? And then under 18/22, I didn't think we were asking staff prepare a cost analysis of the building rejuvenation. I thought we just asked in the end for a list of available companies that do that sort of work.
Okay, that is correct. Yeah. So, yeah, we'll have to rescind that last adoption to do this properly. So motion to rescind. I'm going to do it right. Because we have to make changes now and we had already voted that everything was fine on that one. It got approved, so. Motion to rescind. Sure. Okay, second. All those in favor, opposed, carried. Okay, back to your, so 2016, 2022, yeah, I don't recall because our costs for us to have done it and what their costs are going to be will perhaps be very different, right?
Correct.
Okay, so strike and costs associated with project. Everybody okay with that? Okay. And then the second one, sorry, Councillor Barron, was, yes, I agree with you. We were just looking for various companies that specialize in rejuvenation of community assets.
If memory served me right, Councillor Downey said at UBCM they were quite often set up, and I thought that was the way we left the conversation, was even just to give UBCM a call to find out who those people were at the trade show.
Maybe revitalization. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that staff bring forward.
Just that staff prepare a list of available companies for the purpose of repurposing.
Yep.
I remember it to be more like that. Are you? Yeah. Okay. So then with those amendments, have a motion to adopt the agenda, to adopt the minutes. Seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Now back to February 17th.
That was February 17th.
What?
That was February 17th.
Oh, you know what, Mike?
We have February 17th and then March 17th.
Why does it say February 8th? On my
That was the first set of minutes.
The first one.
Oh, okay. Apologies. I see what I did wrong. Okay, so we didn't need to rescind that. I'm sorry. Mixed up. Apologies. February or March 17th. Then, any amendments to that agenda? Apologies, Council.
I did just have one thing, and it might just be my clarity, but 24/2022, that a WCB WorkSafe rate report comes to council every year in November. To me, that's understood, but just for clarity.
Okay.
Any other changes?
Motion to adopt the agenda then as amended. Moved.
The minutes? Yep.
Sorry. Moved. Seconded. All those in favor? Opposed, carried.
So what will the motion then read? 24, 2022?
It's that a WorkSafe rate report comes to council each year. Okay. Moving to item 9A, report to council on the old school cost analysis. So we've asked for the usage of the school and the income that's generated, as well as the cost of running the old school, and that report is before you.
Move for discussion.
Second.
Okay.
I'll go first, Councillor Bear.
I had one question under the expenses and it was for the CFO, if that's okay.
Yep.
Under old school admin allocation, we've gone from 30,000 actual in 2021 to 34 in 2022, 34, and then the 2022 budget is 10. Is that a bit of accountant speak for I'm changing the way the coding's being done?
Through the chair.
Yeah.
Yeah, so looking at past years, the allocation was based on an average per staff member. I think going forward, looking at it, my personal opinion, I don't think that we allocate that much in wages to the old school. My estimate would be closer to 10,000 versus the 30,000. So that's why I made the change for the proposed budget.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to comment. Thank you for that. I've thrown that out a bunch of times. That were 35,000. I took a couple of rooms and it skewed the whole argument of the old school that it's a $90,000 to keep the building up. I appreciate you catching that. Thank you.
Not
However,
to, not to have,
80,000.
not to have to defend
Yeah.
staff, but there is public works as well that's lumped in there. So with a vacant building, there's probably less.
It's always been
No
the
public
admin
works
allocation.
allocation.
Yeah.
Only 1,000.
So it's a significant amount of money still. Though I don't know where you would shift from them to. Go ahead, Councillor Downey.
So as I read the report, we have the insurance, we have the heating. Those remain the same. Custodial, I don't know the depth or breadth of the custodial charges on that building, but those are the biggest line items as well. Throw in electricity. So I think these numbers become relevant if we want to do a cost benefit analysis of what it looks like to relocate our town office to that space. So it's probably worth looking at what our heating, electricity, insurance costs are for this building as well, because in effect, we're paying for two locations that can function as admin buildings. So can I motion that staff provide us the costs related to this current office around custodial, insurance, electricity, and heating?
Maintenance too. The public works aspect of it, I get not the admin part. One building is more to maintain than the other.
That's probably a good idea. It's low here, but it's
It could be,
could be high here. We don't know.
I think it's artificially low here. It's just been limping it along. But if it was a brand new upgraded facility, I'd imagine.
So that's a motion I'm making.
I'd like 7.
Just for clarity, Councillor Downey, you're looking for apples to apples?
Yes, I am.
So that would include the telecommunication and internet as well then?
Yeah, you're right. Go ahead.
Yes.
Can I just prepare the same report for
Sure.
this office and we can compare it to the side by side?
Absolutely.
Just for clarity also on moving forward, Councillor Downey, is this to be able to have the information that's necessary for perhaps the next council to be able to make a decision on the old school? because we still need that report, like there's a number of things, right? The report that we're waiting for, not report, but the list of names of consultants who specialize in revitalizing or repurposing our buildings. And I mean, I'm just thinking of, are you wanting to like get moving? And because I believe that that's going to cost us millions down there at the old school. It's not going to be a few $100,000. And this is, have we made a decision as council that we're actually relocating to the old school? Or is this just a high level discussion that's accumulating information so that we can make an informed decision?
We have two budgets. We have our capital, we have operating. These speak to the majority are the operating costs of that facility. And the first argument would be is, you know, to compare both operating capital. We have access to funds either through our community forest fund that we've been building through grant programs and other opportunities to repurpose that building. However, that isn't the biggest cost. Our biggest cost is operating costs. So I'd like to know right at the get-go whether, you know, apples to apples operating costs, it's even a wise decision to pursue it further. Okay, that's the basis of my question.
Yeah, and just one other thing. So then further to that, once we have that information, I mean, we are outgrowing our office, and so I guess then the discussion could be around, is that a viable place to go? Do we look at expanding in that existing space that we have that Island Health currently has?
Yeah, those are all discussions to be had, because in the same breath as we say that, we need a gathering place for our seniors. We aren't able to get anything built. This building repurposed would be perfect as a senior center and possibly make a couple living units in here as well. I don't know, I'm, you know, spitballing.
Yeah, that's what council committees at the whole. Go ahead, Councillor Cole.
Yeah, I think living units that hadn't crossed my mind. I think that might be a big hurdle, fire codes and stuff. Is this, I agree, this is a good step, but now we did some strategic priority. I never really saw a straight up list. I'm sure this is on it, right? So, you know, to me, it fits in there. It's just a step on the way. And, you know, I would love us to make some decisions before the end of this term. I think we automatically have to slough something off for the next council.
I agree. I agree. So can we clear the question on that?
Yeah, clarity, staff on clarity.
Just clarity on the motion.
I just, as you had said, my motion was to report on the annual cost on key items. You had said, can I bring the report, you know, comparable to what's here, which I'm in agreement with. So
And that will include the revenue from Island Health and if there's other revenue.
the janitorial costs that we cover.
Yeah.
on the panel.
Favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, item 9B, March 2022 budget, move for discussion. Seconded. Okay, I'll turn it over and ask Brenda to lead us off on this because our CFO, she does have some additional information for us.
So speaking with our harbor manager yesterday, we were reviewing the capital items, and she thinks we can move it from the 32,000 for the dock repairs. There's still a little bit of capital left in the previous time, so she thinks we can move it down to 10,000 to complete that. So 32 down to 10. So that will save 22,000. And I got a quote from the fire truck.
Sorry, to that 32 to 10 is on which?
It's not, it was just
Oh,
information I
okay.
received yesterday.
Okay.
But the on the spreadsheet here.
Yes.
that's gonna be-
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
So for the harbor dock repairs for insurance purposes, 32,000 down to 10,000. And then I had the fire truck company working very hard because it's a busy time for them as well with budgets and rate changes. So he gave me a pretty good, it's not a quote, but it's a very close to a quote ballpark figure, and it's lower than the 49. It came in at 47. So my recommendation would be to include it in the financing costs with the truck. because it is a capital item, it's gonna go there anyway eventually, so it makes sense to, for me, finance it in a long time. So that saves us another 49,000 off the budget, or the capital requests. So that leaves us at. So we're just 15,500, kind of over where we want to be. But there is surplus and some other reserves that we can look at.
And that's still leaving the recommended 200,000 that you were saying out from the surplus, like it wasn't it 800,000? You said you recommend that we not do any more than 600.
600,
Yeah, so the 15,000 could be.
we could
from
pull
that.
from some other surpluses. And that is including the report to our surpluses on page 20 of 26. There's also mayor's or ideas for mayor and council as well. If you'd like to return to that. Today, my recommendation is that we decide and make a decision on capital requests today, then move forward and make decisions on operating the next meeting.
So if I understand you correctly, then we're pretty much in line, and that includes what percentage tax increase? 2%? 2% tax increase. And so then really, if council is in agreement on the capital expenditures, we just have to decide on the mayor and council. And if we have consensus on something from that page, that we decide what reserve we pull that out, if that's your preference. Okay. Okay, Council.
I'd like to go ahead and make a motion that we fund the accessories for the new fire truck through financing, the capital financing.
Seconder for that? Okay. Any discussion? Or were you putting your hand up in favor, Councillor Barron? Okay. If there's no discussion, all those
Discussion.
Sorry, go ahead.
That's what it was is this apples to apples for the fire department? It's not.
It's the exact same
Feathers or
list.
something.
I'll double check with the fire chief, but the list he had is the list I sent for quotes, so it's exactly the same.
Any other questions? All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried.
And I don't think we need a motion for the 10K reduction in hardware.
So I'm hearing that we're generally in agreement with the rest of the capital budget. Go ahead, Councillor.
I mentioned this the last meeting on the spreadsheet under Council Hoy Bay Development. I think we all agreed we didn't like the title of that.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Motion or anything there.
If we're all in favor of the capital budget as it is presented at this time, if we wanted to move to the ideas from mayor and council, it was emailed to you. It wasn't included in this package, Councillor Barron, and it's on our tables and updated. It wasn't in the package.
So to clarify, we are considering page 23 of 26 is what you're asking our council's will on.
Yes.
This is 23 now.
This is just an
I think-
expanded version.
Yeah, I thought we were moving on from that.
Well, no,
The mayor just asked for us to
Yeah.
vote on it
Oh,
or to consider motioning.
well, no, I didn't
acceptance
ask
of
to
it.
consider motioning because we still have to talk about the ideas from mayor and council.
Sure, some of that might affect us.
Yeah, it might affect this, right?
I've misunderstood you.
Yeah.
So the
What-
list, the list that was emailed to us, what are we, like, where is that generated from?
That was, we all got together, it was, I think, on our very first budget meeting, or no, actually, Harinder had asked us all to put our asks in, and then we've been provided an updated version from our CFO, which has struck out a lot that we've either already done or deemed not necessary, or have switched over to the capital budget that you see on page 23.
Okay,
So I was just seeing what from these ideas that are left over, if any, that council is, like, for example, on that page that was provided, item 16, marina, fishing float, kayak float. I know that we have that included on our agenda, that report. It was brought over after our last council meeting. Though we may not all have agreed on a fishing float, we did agree on some sort of a project was worth pursuing and setting some money aside.
I was curious why that report was brought forward here. Is it the exact same report?
It is. But on Tuesday night, I asked for it to be brought forward. I got
Okay.
for
Yeah, I
the
just-
budget, because that's.
It's on the list here.
Yeah, it has budget implications. I think
So,
it's- I guess
On
that is-
that, on that list from mayor and council, number 11, to do with the museum, that was actually, some of that was brought forward from that strategic committee or appointed committee. And there was a thought that COVID funds
Mhm.
would be used for that, for restarting the museum. And if we're going back to that list of, I hesitate to say the word priorities, but there is a lot of parky type stuff on there. And I think with recent conversations, and once the OCP, is actually a book we have, I think we really need to look at putting some parameters around. We have a council liaison, but there isn't really a defined scope. And just from a perspective of being a new councillor, and I know we kind of got messed up with COVID, but I mean, really, if we could get a bit of a scope together for these, like the harbor, I was part of the harbor before, so it wasn't as hard to step into it. The fire department, I was kind of part of it. It wasn't hard to step in as a liaison, but especially when it's such a high priority as parks, I think maybe that's something we could, if I'm not incorrect, but as a council, we could put some of these things into a format so that when that person takes on the parks one, there's a criteria and I don't know what the right word is, but you know what I mean? And because there's a lot to do with the parks. It's not just a matter of making a choice in isolation. And that's kind of where it feels like we're at with throughout our term. There's been a couple of things that kind of get thrown at us, but we don't have that overall plan and thought. And we kind of thought we'd get some of that out of the OCP. And now I think it's time to maybe put some priority into that.
So you're talking about a parks study and parks studies, parks plan. I mean, something that that kind of collates everything and.
Well, in a way, yes. I think we need to have some dedication there, and maybe it's a staff versus a liaison. I'm seeing it in a bit of a liaison role of trying to get an actual committee together, and I know that puts more work onto staff, but it just seems like we're saying a report for this and a report for that, and well, if we had if the council liaison was kind of given a scope and said, okay, you go to the people and you find out from the people, is it a bike park? Is it a person's like an adult exercise area, and start to gather that information and start to funnel it so that we can actually have some real conversations. The state of the park, like one of the things on there is better rocks in the parks. It sounds kind of funny, but in a way it's a really valid, and just to give some direction to it instead of it feeling, in my opinion, feeling a little bit sporadic. I don't know what the right word is. Shotgun.
Yeah, get Councillor Coleman and Councillor Downey.
Thank you, Mayor Wickstrom. Yeah, as the recreational liaison, I'm totally willing to do the heavy lifting on it. We've never really had a commitment from council. I would like to take your suggestion one step further and actually allocate funds to show we're committed. We're going to bring in the community and we're going to say, hey, we got funds for, I'm going to put this number out, 200 grand is that gonna go to the skateboard park all or float, or that needs to be determined? If we could actually pull like something off before the end of our term, it would be good. And to have the money set aside, we can talk about where it comes from. I got some ideas there. Would really give that a committee or, you know, we'll give some teeth and what's the word I'm looking for? It would just show our commitment to an actual project, not bringing everybody on board for planning and then the plans go down the toilet. And if I may, we did originally set aside 25,000 for recreation projects, and in my opinion, that money went, I haven't really tracked it where it went, but for sure the first 25 went to the active transportation plan. And it wasn't fully utilized. And to me, that's not a recreation thing anyways, that is transportation. That's the whole point of the active transportation, is to encourage people to be, you know, coming to town by bike and doing their errands by walking. Not, what came out of it is we want a recreation trail up on Vine Road. Like, it got skewed a bit, but it really was meant to be more of a transportation study. And so we have committed 25 a year in the past. We have 0 set aside. So even if we look back and try to correct that, that's 100 grand right there for our term. So that's my 2 bets. And when I look at this, it's like bike park, park study, number 1, number 2, number 16, the float, the little pump track, 22, 23, new equipment for parks, better rocks, 24. You might as well add, you know, let's look at the dog park. Let's, you know, there's trails, for trails. So there's lots of ways this could go.
Councillor Gannon?
My comment was just going to be that I like Councillor Cole just did, as I went through the document, and, you know, between the bike park study, downtown improvements fund. What is that? I mean, that's under the museum is the landscaping. Long-term plan is, you know, what are we doing for sidewalks? Those come into that as well. So what I'm seeing is that we've come to the place where it's time probably for a master plan of our parks and rec. You know, we don't have that. We don't have a master plan for landscaping, and landscaping, you know, if we know what we're doing with our parks and recreation, then landscaping can be complementary to that, rather than putting money at landscaping and then deciding upon a different, you know, that something needs to come into play and all that work was for nothing. So that's my thought. I think we need a master plan for what the goal is. I'd like to see it led by a councillor. And I don't know that, I don't know how much money to set aside, but I would like to see money set aside for gathering, whether it's $2,000 to host meetings quarterly, check in with the community, have coffee and donuts or something to pull people into a gathering space and have these kind of conversations, because, you know, quite honestly, we did get robbed in our OCP. When we did that, I envisioned the old school filled with people and hearing a lot of voices and allowing in such a manner that, you know, if you brought an idea, you would be in the room to hear that idea and it might spring something forward, right? And then you might have an idea and you know, in that bigger conversation, there's more benefit to be had. And we didn't have that. We had meetings, but they were small scale. If you're sitting at a table with 4 people, you had, you know, 3 other people to give you some food for thought. So that's kind of what I see. I would like to see that, just funds for gathering and meeting with the community, and also funds to consider. And the result of that would be coming up with a master plan for our parks.
I like that idea, like the Catalyst Group. I'd like to see us do something more, but that when that Catalyst Group did that, and then people broke off into different groups and they had discussions and we, you know, we collated all the information. It was just really good. And that's actually where little Emma stood up and said, I really like some better rocks so that it doesn't hurt my knees when I slide down the slide, right? So it's little things like that. You're absolutely right. You get to hear all the voices in the community, and they do vary. But I'm also thinking in terms of we had set aside 25,000. The idea in the beginning, I think, was to commit to 25,000 a year. And just wondering on the parameters of that COVID funding, I mean, outdoor activities, right? Would that be something that we could access 100,000 to set aside from to staff?
Just as she's looking that up, my one thought is that COVID really is, what we learned through COVID is that we need to have gathering places for people to meet where there are limitations or restrictions such as we faced.
Well, look at the subway coffee. Men's coffee class, they would come and bring all of their lawn chairs and sit outside, right? Like,
Put a little patio.
There is an opportunity that there's a big green belt in town that's out of, right? So it's like patio there. I've seen the post on Monday.
When we did the OCP too, like Councillor Downey, what you're saying about the people in the meetings and that, and I spoke with Kevin Brooks because being in this community for so long, exactly what Councillor Downey just said is what more of my expectation was. And there are people in the community who were feeling the same way. And yet you talk to Kevin, and from a statistical point of view and how they put those things together, we were astronomical with the number of responses that we got. You know, we were going, oh, there's only 300 people did the survey, and he's going, are you kidding me? That's like 100% more than we would have expected and what we would have considered successful. So I think we got through the OCP through the regulatory and legal ways that it had to be done. But the way that Port McNeill does things is exactly what you just said. How was that arena built? You know, it was the back of M&Y's on a napkin. It was going to be a log cabin, you know, because somebody could get the logs and fit it together. And that's how we've done things. And so I'd really like to see, I think Councillor Cole, you're being a little bit zealous there, and I love it, but to get something actually pulled off before the end of the term, I'm not sure, but I think just to even get something set up and start those meetings and getting that feedback, because like you say, those rocks that's important to know. And we do have money. We have the community forest money. If through that planning process, we came up with something really good, like maybe we were going to move the dog park or move the ballpark or whatever, we would have access to that money. But right now it's still kind of shotgunny.
Councillor Cole?
Yeah, it just shows no commitment. We've had access to that money all along. If we commit some money to parks and recreation, it would show a lot of confidence in getting people out, not donuts and stuff. It would be like, oh, Port McNeill's finally committed to parks and recreation. Our entire, if you come from out of town and looked at our budget, wow, Port McNeill spends money on recreation. It's just for a couple buildings. You know, Port Hardy, they actually have a hired person. Like, why aren't we talking about that through COVID funds for our kids to have, you know, programs to do, right? Why aren't we making this a better town for people? That is our main thing we're going to attract people in, is making this a great place to live, even better. People are moving here for lifestyle. And I'm without a doubt, there's some people that aren't moving here because their kids love skateboarding and we don't have a skateboard park, you know, like all these things add up. Dog park, you know, like why don't we have a proper dog park that's fenced, or, you know, like we could go on and on. So if we have committed, we're going to have to commit this money at some point. So whether we spend it or not now, it goes in, we do a non-statutory reserve. You know, let's grab the old school demo there. 200 grand sitting there right now. I'm looking at page 20 to 26. Scratch that out, say Parks and Recs reserve. And then when we want to do something with the old school, then let's dip in the famous fund we never use, Community Forest Fund. But like apples, you know, like we're just doing a little shell game here, but at least we would show commitment. Not continually, like, what have we done as a council? Like, we have a sidewalk. We've done tons of stuff in the back, we've got all the plans, but nobody sees that or appreciates that. They would rather see washrooms, they would rather see more trails, see recreation stuff.
I can give the balances of the third kind of buckets that were allocated. So there's the computer and electronics, there's $75,000 remaining. Emergency planning and response, close to 80,000 remaining. Services for vulnerable persons, 181 remaining, and addressing revenue shortfalls is 307,000 still remaining.
We could right now change one of those categories to recreation. It's like, it's up to us now. Parameters on those funds loose, to say the least.
Or we could just add another one and maybe pull from revenue shortfalls, right?
I don't understand.
So we have 370,000, the pot is revenue shortfalls, that's our pot, we made that.
No, that pot was those names came from the document that we got from the government when they gave us that money. And they said that the money had to be used for this, or this. That's where those pot name, I've heard this comment a couple times, and when I made that motion, it came out of that document that we got from the government. That was their words. And the intent of that was that we would attempt to spend the money in those areas, but that was their wording for it.
But that was when the parameters were really tight, and they have since expanded the parameters. So, and I know staff has reported that, Harinda reported what the original was and what they now say that it can be used for. And I believe our CFO brought it once, but that's okay. I'm not expecting you to find it immediately. Anyway, that's fine. It doesn't have to use that.
Yeah, we're not out of COVID yet, it continues, so I'm a little reluctant to, and we, in my opinion, kind of, the money hasn't gone that directly as I wanted to vulnerable people.
Okay, so what's your pleasure on allocating money for recreation? And I think we're in agreement that some movement should be made in that area.
I'm gonna make a motion, we create a $200,000 non-statutory reserve Parks and Recreation Fund.
And the money to come from.
After, or
I think you need to know now. Yeah. So either, you know.
from the old school repair demo reserve.
A motion?
Second it.
Open to a change where the money comes from, but the saying is the real.
Councillor Cole, at the beginning of our term, I think we, when we put that 200,000 in, at least from my point of view, I actually thought we were going to be able to make some decisions, and it made sense. But I don't feel like we've had consistent reporting, like even just to understand the costs. You know, we had tenants in there at the time. We don't have tenants now necessarily. I have no issue with allocating the money, changing it, unless there's some financial reason in the background. We can change it to the Parks and Recs. And like you say, then we get this committee going with some real parameters and some real thought into what we want to achieve from that committee, and it'll be carried on going forward. And if we need to put more money in, then we can put more money in. But if there's no financial reason why we can't change the name of it, if we do decide we're going to demo the old school, it's going to be a whole lot more funds anyways. So, you know.
So just to our CFO, is there any kind of financial reason why we couldn't do that?
I don't see any.
Go ahead, Councillor Dunning.
Reserve general.
General, as far as I know, there's nothing's been committed to it.
So that is where we can pull money for parks. If we decided to do anything, it could come from there. Sure could. So we don't need to reorganize this. My concern is that when this list of companies that are available to repurpose buildings comes back, there is a fee for that. And where will that come from? And sure, it can come from general as well, but we've got money sitting there specifically for old school.
I'd be fine with the general changing to Parks and Rec, but without a line item, to be honest, I'm not too excited about going to the community. There's a lot of cynicism. We're gonna work on this whole plan and there's no commitment from council. Got $2,000 donuts, you know. Without a line item commitment.
So clarify for me, you're not looking for a master plan for Parks and Rec, you're looking for a project. You're looking for.
No,
project
it
plans.
would start, I wanted to, what do you mean by master plan? Hiring professionals to come and do it? It would come out of that fund.
It could
perhaps.
come out of your committee, a Parks and Rec committee. Suggestions, much like we get from other ones, you know, visioning what would be, bring it back, it would either have the support of the community or not, and then council would adopt it. It could be contracted out too, but I mean, I wouldn't contract it out. The residents here know the landscape, they know the land, how it's utilized and used. They know better than somebody else. It could certainly have another set of eyes or put through the veil of that Roger Brooks report to see if it, you know, kind of hits some of those boxes around community gathering. But I have confidence in our communities.
I think what I hear you saying, Councillor Cole, though, is that it will hold more weight in seeing it as an actual line item. And I think I tend to agree. I'm not sure about the I haven't 100% wrapped my mind around the dollar amount, but I would tend to agree if you could say, you know, there's 100,000, 200,000, it's set aside for recreation. Then people will see, oh, the town actually wants to move forward on something, and you might generate more enthusiasm. So I tend to agree with you on that.
My preference would be to see a line item in the operating budget. Something that can be measured. If there's a line item, we've had 25,000 for that. I mean, if that's there and if it just keeps being 0, 0, it says there's nothing going on. And that's what you're speaking to, is that we've had this money and nothing's happened. Well, you know, the money's been there. So where's the problem? It's not that we have no money. It's that there's no action items. So maybe our line item in our operating budget needs a new name instead.
But none of these are operating projects. Like we do a call out, there may be 5 recreation projects we haven't even thought of, right?
And we have the general reserve there to pull from. And if it's a fantastic project, if it's something comes out of there that everybody's like, whoa, this is the thing, jump on it, we do have our community force funds. We don't lack for funds in this town, we lack for a plan and how to move forward with it.
Councillor Barron, did you have something to add?
I understand, I think what everybody's saying, and I think we're all in agreement. In a weird sort of, I'm worried about cart before the horse, because I'd really like this to be super successful. And I understand what Councillor Cole's saying, you might get a bit more buy-in, but maybe that's our next committee of the whole meeting, is to actually discuss how we get this Parks and Rec moving forward. Because the budget has this timeline, and we've been talking about budget since November to try and meet these timelines. And I don't want to get hung up at that spot necessarily, if that makes sense.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not jonesing to blow 200 grand in, you know, a couple of months. Like, this money could be sitting there next year or whatever. Like, I just think we need to have a commitment to some sort of recreation project. This town really hasn't done one that I can think of. We could fix up our pool and spend like hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars for relatively small amount of users. So, again, I'm sure it would be nice to say Port McNeil's serious about parks and recreation. We have created a capital fund. But want to make a plan. Maybe not promised, we'll see what comes up. Well, we got the money, don't worry, but we'll find it.
But just to be the devil's advocate, Councillor Cole, what if you get all these people together and they go, no, that's not actually what we want to do? So that's what I mean by cart in front of the horse.
Well, then that's great. Then we'll know what our town wants and we can make the decisions. Right? I don't want to push for a skateboard park or whatever. I never have in this committee because I don't have a clear consensus of if that's what the town wants or where it's going to go.
Okay. Just to clarify, the motion again was 100,000 from non-statutory reserves or to create a fund.
Could Connor read back the
Yeah.
motion? It was stated.
I thought that was 200,000, but that we create a $200,000 non-statutory reserve fund for parks and recreation from the old school demo and repair fund.
I'll let that stand.
It was renaming the old school repair fund. So it's a rename.
I'll be voting against just because I'd like to see that money stay in the old school fund, but I'm 100% in agreement with you that we need to do something.
Like make another motion out of this.
Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? What was yours, Councillor Barron? Are you frozen?
No, sorry, I was looking at the summary of reserves there just to understand what was the general reserve?
Open to anything. Can we draw-
That's on page, it's on page 20?
Correct.
Why can I not see that? Oh, general, 200.
If I may, I'd like to make a motion, the same
Hang on, we
motion.
gotta figure, I have to figure, so we had 1 in favor and 2 opposed. Are you in favor of opposed of Councillors Cole's motion to rename that old school?
I'll vote against, but then if his next motion isn't what I think it is, I'll make another motion.
Go ahead, you can make the motion. Bill.
We can do the 3 words together.
Yeah, go around in circles. I'd actually like to make a non-statutory reserve, taking 100 from the general and earmarking it for parks and recreation with the intent that there be a structured committee put together with it.
Second for that motion? I'll second that motion.
Discussion? Yeah, I agree. Principal, I'd really like to see it 200,000, just to remind you, like, we committed to 25 per year, so this isn't an increase.
No, but it's getting what we thought we committed to at the beginning. It's getting that put into place, and then you get the committee together, you start to see what the community wants, and then we may find that we're moving money out of community forests or the old school fund or whatever, but it gives us the seed money to get started, and I think it's the intent of what we had said when we first went on council was 25,000 a year.
Other comments, Councillor Downing?
My understanding of the intention behind this and the reason it came forward from Councillor Cole is to have a line item in the capital projects to show intention on behalf of council. So whether the number is 100, 200, or $1 million, there is a line item, there's a number attached to it. And it meets the objectives of that were brought forward. So
Actually, not the capital in the reserve.
these are capital expenditures.
Yes, but he wants to see a line item in the reserves list, right?
Which are capital in nature.
Correct? Okay.
Yeah, it's capital. We wouldn't be using that for operating.
Yeah.
You're not having coffee and donuts out of that fund.
Okay. Understood. All those in favor? Opposed, carried.
Could we have the motion read back, please?
I had the 100,000 from the general reserve fund be allocated to parks and recreation.
To create a Parks and Recreation Reserve Fund, a non-statutory reserve for Parks and Rec.
Thank you, Councillor Downey.
And so item B then by nature has floated into that Parks and Rec, correct? Is that what I heard everybody talking about earlier? That's the fishing float report that was brought back. So then.
Are we done with the wish list?
Oh, no. Go ahead.
It's just where we were.
Sorry.
Wondering about item 8, downtown improvement fund, allocating $10,000. I only say that because Port Alice allocated money for murals. And one up us. So at least we show we're doing something.
Out of curiosity, because I think I discussed that one with Harinder, but Kevin Brooks had brought up something about tax, I can't remember now, but if people did improvements and then we relieved them of their taxes for the first couple of years or something because of the increase, like that was one of the options, as well as having kind of a pool of money that the downtown businesses could apply into. Is that what we're speaking of?
Okay. No, I was thinking something a lot similar or smaller in scale, like the example I gave in Port Alice, they've got $6,000 or 6 grants for $1,000 each to paint a mural on your building. And so businesses can apply to get that. I like your idea, but I think that's more of a bigger plan that is complicated, has moving parts, but maybe we've got a signage initiative. We've got for one of the ideas I've floated to the downtown improvement businesses is maybe all our garbage cans are match or something. There's like an incentive program where, you know, maybe the town's paying for half of flower baskets, you know, so everyone's got flower baskets. So this might give people some ideas, or the chamber, that kind of thing.
Not to be a Debbie Downer, but it sounds like it would come out of that group that we were just speaking about.
I'm sure, right? Yeah. It kind of goes along the line of the recreation thing, or we got a line item now. We're committed. Are we committed to downtown improvement? We got Roger Brooks. We invested in that plan. We've got all sorts of things, initiatives going. So
I like the idea. I'd just like to have that downtown group come and this is what, you know, we're thinking may help.
but what are we thinking, right? Are we thinking if you reside your building, you get a tax break, you know? They don't know that. Or are we thinking 100 grand for downtown, you know? But they don't know. Nobody knows. And I
That's
think,
why I think we need to have those meetings to get together. And I mean, I had never heard of those two things that Kevin, it's not my wheelhouse. So I had no idea that that's what other towns and villages or cities are doing. Which again, you're getting into policy too, when you start talking about signage and some of those other things. So it just feels a bit cart and horsey.
I'm a property owner downtown, so I won't be entering into this discussion. Because I'm possibly a beneficiary.
well, I'll speak to that about property too, but it's not for a specific property, right? This is where we get away from where the conflict gets murky. Like, if you own a house in town, you're not supposed to talk about with, right? We're not talking about a specific property. And I would totally imagine a downtown improvement fund would be open to anybody. only available to certain people, it would be, hey, we want all the garbage cans. You want to join in, the town's paying the shipping. Join in or not, right? It always has to be inclusive of everybody, so.
Yeah, I like the idea. I would tend to agree with Councillor Barron, a little cart before the horse. I feel like the downtown improvement group that has started has great ideas, and I think in their next few meetings, they may be able to come up with whether they turn into a downtown improvement association or whatever, but maybe have a better plan working alongside of our economic development person. Because I can see, you know, I could see things like other communities do facade improvements. So if somebody, you know, wants to access the funds and the town will pay up to $3,000, $4,000, whatever it is. And then slowly people are able to access that. I do feel this is a little cart before the horse, Councillor Cole, but I do really like the idea. I just, I wouldn't be voting in favor of it.
Yeah, and I think probably for Councillor Downey, Councillor Cole, I appreciate what you're saying about, you know, you own a house, you shouldn't do anything with it. But I think that the comment about the siding probably just gave her the kick to get out the door. But it feels like it's a bit of a bigger conversation than this, and it is a bit cart before the horse. So can we call the question?
Sure. All those in favor? Opposed? Just a question.
Yeah, we do have a regular grant and aid, right?
Needed, yeah. Mhm. Okay. Yeah. Here.
Yeah, the siding comment, you know, had nothing to do with really.
I know, but I think that that's just probably.
As that motion was defeated.
Any other items from here? I know Councillor Downey, did you want to speak to the generator for the seniors home?
You know,
I was actually the one that brought that up. I'd been approached by people in town who came and they said, hey, when we were having those 3 and 4 day power outages, you know, if the seniors are lucky enough to have family to cook for them, they are losing food in their freezers. It's medical beds that need to go up and down, and it's CPAP machines. And quite honestly, I hadn't ever thought of those sorts of things. And I put it forward to Harinder as a possible use of the COVID funds. I don't know if it's more the society that runs the seniors housing across the street from us. Maybe it's something that could be twigged into them. I know it was on their minutes as well about staff getting costing. That wasn't my intent, but it was an application of COVID funds was what Harinder and I spoke of.
And that's a very good point, because I think if the society, I know if the society applies for the funds, their costs will probably be way less than it is for a municipality. Just generally, you can add more zeros when it's a municipality. So we'll leave that then for you, Councillor Barron, or Councillor Downey, to nudge the society. Go ahead.
Reciprocal taxation. We still waiting for something on
So I started doing it last week, and then I became aware of the ordering council on Monday. Parameters, and just really
that?
have a good understanding.
Did you catch that, Councillor Barron?
I think she was working on it and she just didn't make the deadline.
Yeah, she discovered a ordering council on Monday, so she has to do some more research and then bring that back to us.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Well, then I'm looking for a motion to, not adopt, but accept as presented on page 23, the capital projects request with the changes that were noted under the fire department and harbor.
So moved.
Seconder? Discussion. Missing something? Councillor Downey?
well, we just spent 20 minutes talking about ideas, and yet that didn't change anything over here. I'm just wondering if you know, was something from here moving over to this document That's why I'm
Well,
wondering.
what I understood is that one motion that Councillor Cole, no, Councillor in the end, Barron made is moving into the statutory, or not statutory, the reserve column.
I think, Councilor Gannon, if I can clarify, I think, what you're trying to say is those funds that are now allocated to Parks and Recreation, should they be not even to the capital budget to be used for this upcoming year? Or did you want to leave them in the statutory reserve for a later time? Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, like this, the,
Either one could be accessed. Bylaw change.
Well, we can, if the group meets, the way I understand from past, if any group or anything comes before us, we can meet and then amend the budget throughout the year if something comes up.
so we
I
had,
apologize. I have to duck out for a 10 o'clock meeting here. I'm expected to be about a half an hour. If you guys are still going, I'll join back in, but if I'm allowed to do that. Otherwise, I need to step out.
That's understood. Thanks,
Thank you.
Councillor Danny, go ahead.
so we have the fishing float, so. Yeah, I guess my question really is are we gonna take some of that reserve and move it on to the capital projects, but. Budget,
I'm inclined to leave it as a reserve, which is sort of, doesn't apply. Spend on that location.
Well, and what I understood from the conversation as well is that we won't really know. It was symbolic to a
It's a
degree.
placemaker.
Yeah, it's a placemaker, but we won't really know until we have some community discussion what rises to that service. Okay. And that may very well be one of them. Are you inclined to leave it on the, or put it on the capital, Councillor?
I'm fine, somebody can explain it to Counselor Mitchell why the kayak or the fishing float or a walkway on the waterfront isn't going forward, because right now it looks like that's just on squash. We're not even going to explore it because we have no money attached to it. So a walkway on
just
the
like all these
breakwater
others,
isn't even mentioned here now.
Yeah.
We talked about it, we appeased and we said, yeah, we can't do the float, but let's look at this. But, you know, if we want to talk about dollars and sincerity, there's no dollars here attached to that. There's no dollars attached.
I did actually talk to Councilor Mitchell as this being a way to be honest, it's like, yeah, he wants to fish and float. We don't know. He wants to fish and float. So I mentioned this as a way to get public input, move that forward. So I think he'll be pleased. Yeah, if I may, I can speak to him afterwards.
Okay.
Let him know. I appreciate you mentioning that. Just one thing that jumped out at me, under Public Works, back to the fire access, income apartments.
It needs to come off.
Yeah, it's just kind of not our problem, is what we decided.
So yes, it's moved over to like a not applicable column, so to your right.
Yeah, but I think this, it
It's
implies that it's sort of our problem and we're gonna deal with it in the future, but I don't think it's our problem. I really don't have a good grasp of that whole project. Maybe it was a meeting I missed or something.
It can be,
Can you speak to that?
Somewhat, yeah, it was a request
Just strike it.
from the fire department.
Yeah.
That's how it was initiated a couple of years ago, and it was basically how to.
Yeah, yeah, well,
how
we
to
understand that.
access-
Sorry, the question I'm asking is, did you determine whether, is that a municipal responsibility? Or
Oh.
is that a landowner or a
Well,
responsibility?
I would have to confer with Pete on that. He's been looking into it and handling it as well on that sort of aspect, but this, if it helps, the actual accesses themselves, if it's one or two, are both on private property, they're not on municipal.
Yeah, and I think that I'm in agreement with the rest of council. I the last piece for me would just be, you know, ultimately whose responsibility is it? I feel it's their responsibility, but yeah, go ahead, Councillor Tony.
Really, we're having a conversation about something that was struck. So I think, you know, for your purposes, Councillor Cole, just draw a line through the whole thing because it's on the 22 requests under non-applicable, it goes away. So
Can I make a formal motion to that request to remove?
I think we already have, we have a motion on file.
Done
We
it.
not?
well, we've motioned it before. It's
okay,
just
sure.
for continuity. This is how it's been presented to us to show that it was brought forward and then removed. That's all.
With those changes then, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carries. And I think that's it. Motion to adjourn. Moved, seconded. All those in favor? Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Staff and Kathleen. Thank you. That's what I get to do for work now. Not that you are working.
Right through the week. These smartphones are a curse. You